Today, I'm going to talk about how someone becomes a prophet, or better, more accurately, wakes up to the fact that they're always destined to discover that. Quick news: I'm planning on doing a bi-weekly Q&A because, so you can tell me what you want to know. Obviously, there's so much information that I just need you to help me tell you what you want. So I thought, why not do a Q&A? And that will be on YouTube and tentatively Tuesday and Thursday. Because I get a couple times a week. So, overdue. I'm going to go over why this is happening now in the grand scheme of things. To make sense of this, you got to have that 1,000-foot view on human history, and then it all makes more sense. And then within the laws of nature, on how, yes, this happens, but it still operates within this time-space reality. So everything makes sense. It all fits into non-dogmatic aspects of science and about how that happened. We have the idea of opposites, and you bring union to those with love. And I was unconsciously acting all this out in not just me, but everyone I was interacting with was in on it unconsciously. We're all here together, and they were my unconscious teachers for this. It's pretty amazing. So why now? In the grand scheme of things, I had this picture up. If you are listening to it and you can't see these images on the screen, but don't worry, you'll just get sucked up by a vortex of fire. And I'm kidding. No one, no one's going to hell. Don't worry about that. It's how soon do you choose love? It's a matter of getting back to the divine sources sooner. Don't fearmonger. Very anti-fearmongering here. We're just trying to focus on. There is negatives to avoid, but if you're aware of the right choice and make the choice, then you'll be good. So I got this picture of a Mayan pyramid, and the Mayans, I like this idea because it's very it's accurate. The idea that things speed up the closer to the end, and you see that in everywhere. Everything is speeding up. It's not an accident that technology making things faster, that the population, I think it was like around 1 billion at the turn of the 20th century, as we moved into the 20th century, and now I think it's pressing 7 billion. It's not random that happened in that time period. You think about it, all human history, and just now in the last 100 years, along with everything else, that this expansion of human productivity and human life is happening now. It's not an accident. Society is coming full circle. In the Mayan calendar, in the 2012 idea, it is onto something. It wasn't that apocalypse type. It all fits into science. Like the Mayans weren't aware of computers. To understand this, you need to unbiasedly look at the big picture. And if you look back at prophecies in the Bible and earlier cultures who were onto this cycle idea, like cycles are fundamental to human life. They exist within our life in short mini cycles, and then our life is one larger cycle. Then one life within a grand picture is going to have many cycles. It's all cycles. So it does not make sense to just try to understand our perspective right now as a snapshot and just ignore everything else because we're moving around. You're just stuck, and that's kind of how the paradigm exists now. Just scientific materialism. We're gonna ignore all this information about human history because it doesn't fit the paradigm. It's like, yes, it doesn't fit the cause and effect basis of what science is based on, but that doesn't invalidate it. And that's what we tend to do. It's natural. We focus on us as we exist right now because our egos are embedded within this. Our egos are very threatened by consideration of the big picture as it is becoming evident because the eternal is love, and love is the opposite of how the ego operates on the premise of separation and trying to find thinks it's God. It thinks that it can find its salvation on its own. Like science is a good example of this ego trying to protect itself falsely because it can't ultimately. We have to return to God. And if you're thinking like, all right, I'm just going to bury my head in the sand and AI is going to take care of this and solve our problems, that's exactly the error in thinking that helps maintain the ego. The ego isn't concerned about your happiness. It's concerned about giving you just enough to think that peace and happiness is right around the corner. If we just keep going on this path a little bit more, but what happens is it just maintains that state of hope. Just always gives you a little bit of hope, but it ultimately is just a continuous cycle of continuous state of just having a little hope. And that until you get crushed, and that's what happened to Babylon. That's what happened to the Roman Empire, and that's what we're trying to overcome now through a end of this hero's journey, this grand hero's journey that society is on. And there's lots of examples of why we're on the same pattern, but at a different level as Babylon and Rome. What you have in those time periods, you had society becoming more feminine. You had the rise. Some people even attribute the fall of the Roman Empire to that rise of femininity, which is a misinterpretation of what's actually going on. What's actually going on is that the mother imago, the archetype of the source of rebirth, the source of eternal, the nurturing love of the eternal feminine, the divine feminine, forming as a source of rebirth, birth from the mother and also rebirth from the mother. And in our society, we have the same of what happened before. The past two major collapses that we can recall is we have a rise of femininity. We have a rise in LGBT identification. It went from around 1% in the early 1900s, and now it's up around 8%. And it's much more acceptable to be openly gay now. And that's not an accident. That's a part of this desire for the feminine of our psyches to come into consciousness. The end goal is to consciously recognize what is going on. Because when you consciously recognize what is going on, you find God. And you find God with evidence of the eternal. Because it's about making that conscious connection. And basically, we have this speed up, as referred to as a celestial speed up by some at the end of the Mayan calendar. They predicted the same thing. So you have science acting as a substrate for this speed up. And in this, you have people incarnating in this reality to serve a role in helping connect the dots. And that's why I'm presumably here, is to um, recognize my purpose. And my purpose is to help break through to this new paradigm and help communicate it, help people believe in it, because it is important. It's your soul probably here now to partake in this great opportunity to achieve enlightenment in this speed up um, period. And I try to avoid so much of the pseudoscience because I am a trained scientist, but in the grand scheme of things, the idea of a speed up and the idea of this um, time in this cycle being an opportunity for you to achieve enlightenment more easily. You don't have to sit under a tree for 20 years, as I like to say now. But it's true, because what's happening is that technology and science speeds it up in the form of being a higher definition mirror, a higher definition screen of your true self. Because becoming whole, becoming enlightened is the process of recognizing that you are the universe. The universe exists as one mind, as a reflection of your mind. And that is what I recognized in my supernatural experience. It was supernatural, but I'm trying to demystify that as part of all of this, because we are to basically make normal the spiritual and the divine, because it is normal. And the idea of a prophet being born here is, it's gonna be met with resistance of your ego, and it shouldn't be, because you're all here to manifest it in this time space to serve on your own journeys to your waking up. You have your roles, I have my role, people have their roles, we all have our roles, but ultimately the end goal is for all of us to wake up, and it's guaranteed, it's inevitable that you do return to a divine state. So that's why I ixnay on the hell idea, because you're guaranteed to return to a divine state. I don't, because the system is perfect. It's all completely perfect. I don't know what can happen when you die, and because just logically, if you were invested in fear in this life, and that reverberates, that energy like continues on after you die, and it makes sense, if because when the unconscious becomes real, and that's what happened in my experience, is that the lag between what you think and what you experience in the physical world, just that lag is eliminated. And like in a dream, what you think is what occurs. And it makes sense that if you are invested in fear-based projections and you're treating them as real, and when you die, that you don't get to project. You don't have the benefit of dealing with projections out here, because instantly everything is just real. So that's scary, and that could create a very frightening condition. I'm getting this from my experience, but also the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and this is a Buddhist. I'm not be careful on saying things. I'm not sure, but it's called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and their idea is, if you're invested in fear in this real world, if you're someone who just blames, you're gonna die the physical death, and all that's just gonna be right in your face, and you don't. What's getting projected out is just boom, and that would be scary, and that could descend into something resembling a hell. But even that is just an illusion that you would get over. So that's that. And I'm going to get into my hero origins. That is so weird. Hey mom, what do you want to be? What do you want to be when you grow up, Ben? I want to be a prophet. I want to. I didn't quite go like that, but here is what I saw. So, the hero's journey is a reflection of an architecture of this psyche we exist in. It's a blueprint, or imagine it as a roller coaster track. The track is there. You're in the cart, and you're going on this track, and that's what the hero's journey is. But through archetypes, getting you through this course of life that ultimately takes you around this cycle, and you return back to where you started, but at a more expanded state, more wisdom, and fundamentally less fear, more love. And that's what my experience was. Get off the screen. Those, like a Microsoft update, right? When I don't need that now. So I'll go back to when I was my earliest memory. Freud described he wasn't spiritual like this, but he would more fit into the materialism paradigm that our society is based. But even he noted that someone's earliest memory, there's something about one's earliest memory that has special significance to the rest of their life. It is a snapshot into your soul that has utility in helping you realize your full potential. This has been something, just an observation from psychoanalysis of trying to understand it. And I do understand it because I'm a prophet. Okay, I won't swear. But that was supposed to be a joke. See, the thing in this is that you got the goal for me to communicate this is just to be myself, and sometimes myself says jokes that do or do not land. Okay, so there's this idea that what you fear and what you love get intertwined in this polar opposite but relatedness that helps guide you through life. I'll give you an example of how that worked out for me. So my earliest memory was sitting in my earliest significant memory. I might have figments of memories that were early, but my earliest significant memory was my grandma asking me what I loved or what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I said a mailman. And simultaneously, I was thinking, well, how can I be a mailman when I don't know how to read? Because I didn't know how to read at that point. So I wanted to be someone who delivered messages, but I was shy and didn't know. I was shy and horrible. I thought I was horrible at reading and writing, but I didn't actually. I ended up okay because I did get into a PhD program in neuroscience and go to the University of Michigan, so I can read. But in first grade, I got put in a special reading class, but because I didn't say anything, they assumed I couldn't talk or read. So they put me in there for one day. I read a few lines of probably Dr. Seuss, and they're like, all right, we can read. And that was the end of that. And then that continued throughout my life. And just in third grade, I won an essay competition with the help of my grandma expressing my heart. And the essay competition was on how you would want to use a certain amount of money to help improve the sunny. It's like you got a sum of X amount of dollars. How do you want to spend it? And I said to help build an indoor track so that my grandma would have something to walk around in the winter when there was ice. And that was just a pure expression of my heart. And she helped with that. And there's this pattern of me expressing my heart through writing that while it was fearful doing it despite not liking it, and that is what guided me through life. So when I applied to college at the University of Michigan, it was the same thing. We had an essay competition, not essay, entrance essay, and I expressed my initial interest, my initial intrigue in consciousness, because I'd always been interested in science, but it wasn't until towards the end of high school where that interest became concentrated in anything related to the brain. And that began with just a curiosity of the divine. And you can read, I'll put a link to this story in the show description. But around 11th, 10th grade, I had the synchronicity which involved me trying to consciously communicate through actions to the divine, to God, to the eternal. So I'll say that again. I was consciously trying to communicate to the divine through this action in which I picked. There's an ant on the kitchen floor. So the ant on the kitchen floor, you're probably just gonna take a paper towel, pick it up, and put it in the sink or whatever, and throw it away. But what I did, I had the thought, okay, so if this is all life, and we all exist in some interconnected way, my conceptualizations of metaphysical structure weren't quite at the level now, but it was the same idea of life being interconnected. Thinking that, I pick up the ant, I carry it outside, and then when I come in, this is at night when everyone was asleep, and the oven alarm goes off and it's flashing 11:11. And I know that, well, hold on, I'm gonna get, that was completely on its own. I had not been using the oven before. A few minutes before, I had remembered seeing the oven, and it wasn't even near 11:11. But then again, it was the alarm. Hypothetically, the oven short-circuited to be synchronized to the time that when I made this conscious connection to the divine to carry the ant out. So what that was, in retrospect, it was a lead up to what would eventually happen when I had got full consciousness of who I am and what I'm doing, and God is acting through me. And so that was a synchronicity. As Jung describes synchronicities, there's something we all experience, but he describes them as bringing the distant future into the present. And he didn't quite say it this way, but I know that I've been reading A Course in Miracles. This all happened before I read A Course in Miracles, but basically the idea is we're destined to wake up to our divine self. Synchronicity is like a miracle in the sense that it just tells you that there's something there, like this, there's something else missing. And that's kind of how I just continued. There's something missing. And this whole time, I was being completely controlled by the structure of the psyche, which is all within God, and the whole time. And so it was all right there the whole time. And that's what it was, yeah, I'll get into it. So archetypes are, I'll go back. Okay, so the myths on the origin of the hero. In the grand scheme of things, you have birth of both society and a hero, and that comes out of the feminine. You're born from the mother. So the mother is the infinite creative power, love, compassion, emotion. It also has negative aspects, which we will get to, but negative in a good way because you have opposites. Not to be like some Roman historians who think feminism underground. Because we'll get into that. That's what we're trying to avoid. So you're born from the feminine, and naturally the masculine attitude is it's also the ego. And when I say feminine and masculine, I mean we all have it within ourselves. Grand picture of things. So the ego is the masculine attitude, and that's I want to be independent. I'm going to go conquer the unknown, and that's where that established the development of science. The ego trying to carve out its own role, and while that seems bad, it's also necessary for all of this. Like you're suffering, but you can't have this experience, this amazing experience, without an independence from the divine mind. There's different ways to think about that. But that's how I think of it. So you go out in the unknown, and that develops Western civilization, that develops science in these attempts to become like God through means other than God. I mean, some you have spiritual scientists, but as a collective, they're just a nugget within a larger collective. So what did I do? This is in the least arrogant way. I went out where you could. So I'll start. Back in August, I wrote this. Okay, so the mandala is a representation of ourself, of our God, and you often have in these mandalas is a fear symbol surrounding the peaceful center. This is the Egyptian one, and that's because to find true peace, you have to go through the trials and tribulations, and you have to face your fears because that's what's going to guide you through life. And if you focus on selflessness and love and use that as motivation, not motivation of biological instincts, at some point you have to detach from the normal egoic range of culture. If you can imagine that we have a kind of imprisoned will in which our instincts are keeping us within a certain range. Into as the hero goes beyond that and pushes through that, he goes in the name of truth and love, because you do what's good for society despite what society thinks is actually good with them, because you've gone beyond the normal. You're going beyond the range, because at the edges of the society, it's complete insanity, because this is on the dollar bill. On the dollar bill, you have the pyramid, and the eye is detached from it on top. And at the very top of knowledge, at the pinnacle of knowledge, you reach a point where, and science is bringing this to light, where the whole paradigm just falls apart. Like we have the hard problem in neuroscience of how do you get from brain matter, just moving particles, okay? You could map out every neuron's activity continuously and monitor it, but then what would you even have at that point? How would you get from that to consciousness? I mean, that problem cannot be solved and will not be solved from a scientific materials perspective. Consciousness does not arise from matter. is synchronized to its existence. And reality is a reflection of consciousness. It's not the reality reflects consciousness. It goes from consciousness to physical reality. And it's correlated to brain activity, because in this reality, well, it's a really hard problem to conceptualize, but you're not going to make a general artificial intelligence by copying the brain or using computer algorithms to copy brain function. And you're not going to make a self-aware thing, because the AI community, not everyone, but completely ignores things like the unconscious. Are you gonna program in archetypes that we don't even know how they work into the computer to create the consciousness that we have? It's just, the whole paradigm exists on the back of willful ignorance and fear. Ignorance and fear. Ignorance is something I add because you have to bury your head in the sand just to operate at the highest levels of science, because like, it's not like you don't know these hard problems exist. We just ignore. We don't know how the universe began. Like, what happened before it? We're just gonna, probably important. It's not something just to ignore. It's something we should probably consider, and we don't. And that's complete insanity, because not ignoring it and thinking about it brings us to God. It's a quick little, this is a part of this quickening, is just to like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. We don't know anything about that. And science isn't offering any answers to who we are and why we exist. As neuroscience and psychology progress, society deteriorates. Well, and that doesn't make any sense. Well, shouldn't we, if we be learning more, shouldn't problems get better? And no, they don't, because you can't solve a problem from you can't solve these issues from the insane perspective that created them. So in the left versus right debate, most of us are caught in between this, and we can't see the big picture, because we're just looking at in the same patterns that gave rise to all the problems. And the only solution is to recognize, well, you can recognize it through reason or God, but through reason you realize it's impossible to think that we're going to solve these issues without recognizing they're both insane. There's no, the left is insane, the right's insane, it's all insane. Like, if you think it all seems crazy and doesn't make sense, that's because it is. It's not, there's no way to reason our way to solving our problems, because it'll just create more in people's emotions and biases. You're never going to cut through those biases. So the second we say, hey, that's an impossible situation, then we can, well, it's all forcing us to find God and find our divine nature and wake up. And you only can overcome the fear and chaos by waking up. There's different ways to do that, but not waking up to dogmatic religion. I'll go into that, because Christianity, not the answer. Even Buddhism, it's more in tune with the internal spiritual, but at this time in history, we're combining science with it. And I don't want to cut down on the Buddha, but the only thing is that system of thought makes it kind of that you have to be in complete stillness and do everything perfectly and detach yourself from everything to reach enlightenment. And that's not the case at this point. So you don't have to go sit under a tree for 20 years to become enlightened. You can just recognize the error, recognize the illusion, recognize that this is in fact a dream, and then wake up. And that's what I'll be teaching. and how to follow your heart to do that. So the Eye of Horus, it's a spiritual sight, the sight of the spiritual sees through all the error, and you can remove yourself from that. So back in August, I had this girl I was talking with who was my ex, and there's just a lot of emotional energy tied up between me and her, and I couldn't, like, everyone has an ex that they think about, but I I just knew I just be better for me to just not talk to her at all and intentionally cut off any hope of that, because if that idea is in your mind, then your ego's going to keep latching onto it. So what I did, it was a pretty cold, it was my attempt to tell the truth, but it was pretty cold-hearted in that it was wrote a story describing a text. Well, I was naive at the time, so I was calling her out for being not true to her, for calling out her persona, I guess, which I also had a persona because I was um, doing the same because I was asleep. So the disingenuous of her, and I'm calling out my own disingenuous now. So I wrote this story, and it's a story that's gonna cut this off. So there's a lot of psychic energy in going into that. And what happened was I wrote this story that fit an archetypal pattern and was a step towards moving deeper into my own unconscious. And I'm going to show you just a snapshot just to show you it's legit. So I submitted the story to the Anonymous Writer, which is an online page, and I had never wrote anything like this. I never wrote anything like this, and it just poured out of me, poured through a creative story and it was good. So that was strange for someone who was facing their doing the right thing for them and moving towards a different direction while using something that I would using writing and someone I love just tied up. So that was just that motif of fear and love just epitomized. All of this would be epitomized. And the story was about following my heart because that's what I was doing. I became so fed up with how hopeless everything was and how before the spiritual part, because the situation we're in just seems so hopeless. There's this debates that are completely missing the point because we only can solve these issues by collectively being better ourselves. And it's like, how do we get people to withdraw their projections and overcome their own fears and stop blaming the world on being resentful? So that's when I started a program organization called Align U, which I'm still doing. And Align U is about helping young people or anyone follow their heart in practical ways. How do you take what you're interested in and turn that into a career? And that turned out to be God's will, and that is God's will. And I will be, to be your true self, because your true self is aligned with God's will. And that's aligning with God's will involves making a career, doing what you love, because what you love is what's unique to you, and you can't get that well being in the cookie cutter mold of society wants to put on you. But it's also a challenge because you still have to make a living and you have to fulfill those biological, you need to eat and have shelter. And how do you go about doing that? And that's what I was trying to help promote. And I was doing that while a PhD student in psychology / neuroscience, and that's not a normal thing. Like, I have, obviously none of this is normal, but I had so much responsibilities at a PhD student, and now I'm gonna be like, oh, it's what I wanted, but it's so meaningless because how can you know that society is going head on into a train and just bury your head in the sand? And that's what well-intentioned people do. And it's because maybe they don't know if there's no, they don't, maybe they just ignore the fact that they don't know that there's any hope, but there is hope. And I was going to create that hope. There was nothing like this that existed for high school students and any young people besides like a personality quiz. There's not any real good guidance on how to follow your heart. And that needed to be in place before there would, and that couldn't create hope. And I had thought before any of this happened that, you know what, I could change the world with this idea. And I didn't realize where that would lead. And that at that point in time, that happened in August, and the spiritual experience would happen in November. I was beginning to wake up to who I was. And in that process, I started putting my interests and skills to use to serve mankind. Like, who in their right mind says to themselves, and I committed to this in writing and documented in a video later, that I'm going to commit myself to mankind and sacrifice anything I wanted was just going to be at best a byproduct of what I was doing. And that just made logical sense because we're destroying ourselves. It doesn't make sense to just ignore that. That's insanity. And because insane if you know what's happening. Not saying everyone, but kind of now, but because I know I'm going to tell you how to actually go about helping, but it's complete insanity to be killing yourself. You know it's going to come and then not do anything about it. So I had that motivation to do something about it, and I had cut myself off from caring about the only person I really ever liked that much. So I had that out of my life, and I had all this energy, and I always had an interest in meteorology, and at that point I became a hurricane. And ironically, well, at that point I'm in Miami, and that's when the hurricane. That was all during those hurricane. Was it Irma? I forget the name. Well, I don't know. So, as a physical representation of what was going on in my mind, I was becoming a concentrated hurricane, just all in on trying to bring this idea into existence because the world needed it. And so what I'm saying is that was waking up. That was the process of waking up to the fact that I am a prophet, and I was eventually going to get to this divine inspiration because I had to go through my fears and I had to go through this supernatural experience of rebirth. And that's typical of the hero. The hero has supernatural origins. That's Jesus, Moses. Moses almost died. He got left by the river. I'm not so up to all the, can only know so much. But all the origins of heroes. Buddha, he left his cushy palace and because he saw the suffering, and he was like, I'm serious when I say that. I'm connecting to the same archetypes that those people were activated by. So he just saw the suffering and was how can I live with all that? Like, you just see it, and it's just like so insane just to, it's because the world is actually crazy in that it's a fear based illusion. And once you recognize that, you, it's crazy to not try to, because it is our, it's our inevitable destiny to return to a state of bliss. So why would you put that off? That's just crazy. And so the hero has supernatural need, and I had my whole life, I looking back, was all orchestrated by orchestrated through the use of archetypes for me to wake up, and then the actual experience, which I'll go into a little bit, but you can read it. I'll post it. And wait, what was it? I lost my thought. I get a little emotional about this stuff because it is so important, but it's also not important because it is a dream. So the hero goes out, calls an adventure. Yes, there's so okay. I'll just explain how the call to adventure happened. It happened throughout. It happens throughout your life in many hero cycles, but with this one, I had returned to that story I just mentioned about the emotionally charged one where I was fully committing to mankind. And I returned to writing that story. And because I was putting the finishing touches on this, what I call a mentor book. The mentor book is a different kind of, it's a, well, it doesn't exist because it's never been written by a prophet before. But how to follow your heart. And that requires putting things in the proper perspective and putting the importance of your life in its proper context. Because when you realize your life, like that's the missing element of really, and that element ended up being spirituality in the divine. Then that's when you connect to your internal God, then that's pretty good motivation to do what you should do to get back to that state of eternal love because it is your inevitable destiny. So I return to this story and I start writing. And for 7 days, or even more than that, I just kept writing and I'm writing and I'm writing. And in the end, I wrote over 100 pages around there of this archetypal story. And in this story, I was writing into my own mind. And it was just flowing, just word by word. And I was just typing. And it's just coming out word by word. And this beautiful story about describing love is just coming out of me. It's describing the metaphysics of love and going through my own memories, through metaphors, and that's just coming out of me. So during this, I feel amazing. It's because pure love was coming out of me. But as I go and I go and I'm like, all right, this is weird. Like, what is going on here? Like, why am I writing this story about love and it's so good and I suck at writing? And who in my mind is, I didn't know this was in me. And when I started the second day, the night after the first day, I had a dream that was prototypical encounter with the anima. And it's in this dream, I'm driving down a road and I see a girl on the side of the road. She's the most, it's when someone sees their anima in their dream, it's like, holy crap, they're beautiful. And that's what I thought. It was the most beautiful person I ever saw. So I'm driving a sports car. She gets in. We go up to a mansion, and then as I get out of the car, she says she forgot something back the way we came. So we get back in the car and we drive off looking for it, and then that's what would set off the rest of this. I consciously integrated my anima, which is the ultimate goal. Jung called it the shadow integration is the apprentice piece, the anima integration is the masterpiece. And that's what I did. And that's your source of, it's a little different for a woman, but that's the creative source to the collective unconscious. The anima is described as a someone who who's everything. It's connected to everything, so it helps. We're dealing with something non-physical, so it's communicating information from the unconscious and tapping into that infinite creativity of the divine feminine of rebirth. So I was consciously integrating that into while writing. The writing, if you remember, like I'm writing, and this is a projection into the writing so that I can then make it conscious. And that's what all of this is. All of this is something to make conscious that it is part of us. Taking back our shadow projections. Taking back our shadow projections is the only thing that can actually help society. And taking everything back is to connect with God. So the anima, making it conscious, because it also is the source of everything and your fears, your suppressed fears. So I was making that conscious. And as I'm writing, I'm thinking, okay, so this has got to be something, because it was such about love and it was accurate and it was uncovering information. I'm thinking I'm transcribing information from some divine source. I didn't know at the time. I thought maybe I knew of prophets of the past or people writing information from some unknown sources in their own mind, and I'm like, okay, that's something like that's going on. I didn't know what it was. And as I keep going, as I go deeper and deeper into my own mind, I realize that this girl who I had, intentionally denied my biological instincts so I could focus on helping society, she was my anima. And that is prototypical of the hero and the hero's journey, is that in their physical reality, the person they met is more is like a concrete version of what's inside themselves. I had a page open. I was going to read an excerpt from the Jung. Jung is where I'm getting, is where I went back to try to make sense of everything that happened. How I showed you that I'm not crazy, but you are. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Okay. Oh, this page 2079. 2079. So the idea is that in the physical reality, we meet projections of our unconscious, but obviously it's not, you're not always going to have you project onto someone who you think they are, who your unconscious is. You project, and that creates your misinterpretations and biases. You're not recognizing that you're projecting. But for the hero, the physical person is a more maps on much better to what their actual anima is. And that's important because as you go into your own mind and you're as you go deeper into your mind, you're uncovering more truth. And being all planned ahead of time, as this was going to happen to me, it makes sense that, well, it has to happen this way. So that's hero strength. But that I would meet this person who was a very close match to my anima. And when I was coming to that recognition, it was like, okay, this girl, she is a writer. She's nurturing. She's so purely feminine. And I'm gonna sound crazy obsessed, but this is all real here. So I'll read. I'm gonna expert from this book called The Ego and the Archetype about describing how the person the hero meets is the Virgin Mary archetype, and that's where the um, idea from the Jesus story comes from. Okay, so we also have expressed here the theme of the taming of the wild creature. Apparel is the motif of the unicorn who can be tamed only in the lap of the Virgin. In alchemy, the unicorn symbolized Mercurius, the elusive spirit, difficult to grasp and contain. In one text, the unicorn turns into a white dove, another symbol for Mercurius and also for the Holy Ghost. Thus, the Virgin who can tame the unicorn will be synonymous with the lunar portion of the stone, this philosopher's stone, which represents wholeness in alchemy, which brings birds willingly into captivity. These images refer to a certain attitude engendered by the lunar or yin aspect of the self, which brings wild, free, but undisciplined urges into relation, into reality, into submission to the transpersonal totality of personality. It is the taming of the wild willfulness which thinks it is sufficient unto itself. An actual woman may serve this function for a man. She must be virginal in the symbolic sense described by Ether, one who belongs to herself and functions as an independent feminine, being uncontaminated by masculine attitudes. And that, in alchemy, the unicorn in the lap of the Virgin was clearly associated with the dead Christ in the lap of Mary. So that was her role. And when I came to recognize that, I didn't know this stuff yet, but I knew that she was inside of me. So when I try to tell her that, I'm trying to scheme up ways to make her come to the conclusion on her own. So I wrote some questions because I was trying to go it scientifically. So I was gonna write some questions for her to think through and then come to the conclusion. But that's just crazy, you know. Like, so any attempt to do that, I didn't realize at the time, was just gonna put up her ego's defenses and bring about fear, because that's the idea is we can't just wake up right now and have God just say, wake up, because that would just create fear. And that's not what God does. You have to come to the realization through your own doing. God isn't going to force its way. It's because it's perfect love, and love is only giving of love. That's all it can do. It's just up to us to recognize it's here. It can't appear to us because it's always here. It never went anywhere. So, and that's what we're struggling with. So during this experience, you can read it. What happened is kind of like, well, I became conscious that I was reality and that my mind is this physical reality. And that was experienced as my unconscious pouring out into reality or recognition. And it was all because this was all planned, and this whole thing is some predestined dream like thing. It wouldn't have been difficult to plan out ahead of time, like, all right, this, when he comes to this conscious realization of his divine nature, we're gonna time up a bunch of synchronicities to help drive the message in, because he came to this on his own. Then these supernatural experiences, and that's where the birth of the hero, the mysterious birth of the hero, is really, I think, because of hero birth is rebirth and self-conception, which I'll be going to a lot because you getting self-conceived is what this main purpose of this is. The supernatural aspect of the birth, and that's bringing. It's going to be the birth itself is going to be synchronized to occur with an experience that makes it undeniable. Because if I didn't have a supernatural birth, then how would I have the conviction to then go about and say any of this? How would I have the tangible evidence to help you believe? Because I couldn't communicate this message and serve my purpose if I was just because I'm just a regular person. Where's the evidence for you to believe any of this? All right, it's like, okay, we have a supernatural birth. If this person incarnated in this reality to help convey a message, let's give them some tools. Let's give them um something to work with. And but even more so than the tangible evidence that anyone can see is like, all right, that's crazy. That signifies an internal. Is as a scientist, this information I came to in retrospect and looking back on it through reading a lot of Jung and mostly I brought the collective works of Jung and been reading through that, and I don't know who I am, but I would not. I hate to be so speculative. I like to stick to the facts, but a reincarnation of Jung is, I don't know, because I read his. I don't want to say it. I take that back. I'll just stick with what I know. As someone born here to do this, this map of the psyche that Jung lays out is really, it would be really, it's dense to people and foreign to try to grasp what he's describing because he's laying down themes and science of mythology and scripture because he knows what religion and mythology actually are. We kind of dispel it because it brings up stuff about our paradigm that highlights the errors in it. But those are those are projections of the unconscious into story form, and they're contentious to people and they're captivating because they bring up truth with inside of us, and these myths capture that through stories. And one of the goals of all of this is to make concrete that information and integrate it into science. And in reflection on the supernatural experience, so I'm experiencing this continuous synchronicities. I'm noticing how my mind is reality, and it's got timed up to this realization. So it made me realize that it gave me the conviction to go all in on this. And over time, as I learned more and more, I came to the clear realization that my life fit this hero's journey, and that what Jung describes is true. What Eastern philosophies describe about religion, about karma, is true. I've been reading this Course in Miracles book, and that shiz is true because I independently came to those same ideas while aligning with God's will. And because my earliest memory of fear and interest in my whole life, it all fit into this coherent sequence of events that led to this inevitable conclusion. I didn't choose my parents. I didn't choose my friends initially in the town I was from. I didn't choose what I'm interested in. I didn't choose to be interested in science. I didn't choose to be this shy. I didn't choose to be this introverted. But it was all these things that made this possible. And knowing that there's a lot of other independent sources about what this time period is about, and the Course in Miracles, it's good stuff, by the way, and I'll be promoting that. But it describes that there's special agents, basically, and that's what I was projecting out during the experience. I was realizing that we're all in this together, and there's an unspoken truth of our divine nature, and there's so much I'll be going into in the future about what actually happened during this, to what was going through my mind. But one of the things going through my mind was that there's, I thought I reversed what was actually happening. I thought everyone else knew about what was happening to me, and they just weren't telling me because they were forcing me to figure it out on their own, and they couldn't say anything. It's like they knew I was due here to serve this purpose, and God is real, and they just couldn't tell me. And that's exactly what it was. But it was exactly what it was. So during this whole time, because it was all synchronized up, I was reading everyone's, not particular thoughts, but reading their motivations and desires. I was in communication with God and the divine. So I was seeing through to everyone's true self, and everyone was trying to help me to figure this out. They couldn't say anything. It's like they had a. The truth is that our true selves like have this muffle on ourselves, and our egos just push it down, and it just wants out. And so I was seeing through to everyone's true self, and everything is one mind orchestrated to help move this along. And I was a piece to this, with everyone in on this with me to help push me through to find this truth, so then I can then go back and communicate this. I mean, each and every one of you helped me on this. And we are actually one mind from one source. And we're all here together, and we're on this crazy journey of waking up. It's gonna be, when we look back on the truth, and I'm part of waking up is being able to look back on the truth and be like, wow, that's incredible how that all happened. And you all, each and every one of you, wants this to be true, and you have fears and doubts, this imprisonment of will, ego thinking it's separate from God. It's not. That's the wrong perspective. That perspective is, I made a little diagram. So we are our own figments. I don't know how to say it exactly, but we all have our conscious centers. But we have the idea that what we want personally is better than what God would want for us. And it's like aligning with God's will is about realizing that God knows best. And you thinking and trying to use things like just strictly thinking science can solve all our problems, but it's a part of the whole culture. Thinking you know better than God is the error, the fundamental error. And I drew this. If you imagine our egos, this illusionary separateness from God, because it's everything. Love is anything, everything. And if you have perfect love in the center, and then you have your spirit, the Holy Spirit, which is between us and the perfect center of love. And the Holy Spirit is what I apparently am consciously closer to. And I was born, because I was born into my interests, fears, and life experiences all pushed me towards a life, because it's a big conspiracy to force me towards this, an unconscious conspiracy. And all you guys, I'm the collective unconscious physical manifestation of someone you're supposed to find intrigue in, and just just let it in a little bit. You let the Holy Spirit in just a little bit, and think about it. It only can grow. You can either ignore it and say it's all BS, or you can look at it and say, that's interesting. And I hope that's what I'm trying to do here. Say, that seems weird, but there's something about that. A kid saying he went on this hero journey, on this supernatural experience, and all this stuff. It seems so crazy, but it makes sense. Why would a neuroscientist, do that? And like, he wrote a big story. Why would he be so into it? And it's because it is real, and I actually am here to not tell you what to do, because only God knows what to do. I only know that the divine is real. It's your inevitable destiny to return to it, and I can help push you towards it and tell you by what I'm going to be doing on a regular basis is going to help the voice grow. It's going to see, and the goal is, I don't know, because we're going to go through a rough time here as a collective, because we're being forced to find God. And so I manifest here in this reality as prototypical hero, because as we come full circle, there's more people, I'm sure, but we have these signs to help you find God at this critical period. So you have these miracles that happen, and there's going to be more happening. All this is a miracle. And I'm going to be working with people, and you can read my story of the bracelets. His name is Kevin Rice, and we met on account of a synchronicity that screams, hey, it wasn't just random chance you got some kind of, he has peace sense to come here, because when I get there, and he had the same bracelet on. And I have everything about this is meant to help you. And one of those things is that what happened to me perfectly maps on to how it should have happened. Jung laid the groundwork for this, because this happened to me, and I can go back. Jung predicted that this is exactly how it would happen, because it all fits the blueprint, and it's not. I know it's a challenge to overcome past case studies of, actual crazy people who, well, this has nothing to do with that, because I'm laying out the argument here and showing it. I'm being open. I'm doing Q&As. Like, if God was trying to help you to wake up now, like, what else would you want? Like, it's pretty perfect. Like, right here, talking to you, like, Holy Spirit, like, whatever you want to know, I can tell you. Well, I can't tell you whatever you want to know, because I don't know it. Anything about me anything I know that can help you is what I want to do. I'm going to be an open book here, and I'm going to bring this to a close. It's been a while. I don't know. Tonight, basketball and sports are just distractions that pacify my true self. But if you know that, I used to be obsessive. abandoning that was a part of this, because a lot of entertainment just it distracts us from the true issues and allows, but for a good reason too. And there's just a lot to say because we're on this track, and we're not. We're all the ego thinks it can control itself, but it itself exists within everything, the totality of God. So as we think we're trying to avoid the truth, we're still being guided to it. And so things that keep us asleep, like sports and movies and gossip, and all that's keeping us asleep while we collectively move back towards God. And that's a long rant, a long way around saying that Michigan and is playing Villanova in the national championship today. And I look forward to that. It's my school, Michigan. I used to be obsessed with it, like I said. So I look forward to this. And I love doing this. This is what I was meant to do. And I comments, YouTube Q&A, and I'll be answering questions posted on, if you send it on Twitter, or I'll look on the YouTube comments, or just that you see us on Facebook, I'll check that out. And yeah, be here a while and look forward to hopefully waking up as many people as possible. And don't be afraid of anything. Well, you should, I don't know. You should be concerned, but not afraid. Concerns over there, and go the other way. And going the other way is this way. Love, forget dogma, forget Christianity is so tied up in misinterpretations and misuse, but there's still truth in there. That's still good, just not all the baggage that comes with it is what we have to just say, like, that's so, it's just so has many insane aspects that can't really be reasoned out because you can't hear insanity from insanity. So it's better just to just abandon it. And I don't want to say it because there's still people still find a lot of goodness and meaning. You can indulge in it, but know that this is a dream, and that ultimately salvation can only be found through yourself, because through yourself, uncovering all the rocks in your mind, waking up to your true self, and really just it's a dream. You can, the moment you decide to want this is a dream, man, it just lightens your heart, like because it is. I can tell you, I saw it. I saw the walls of a dream on my Medium. I describing this dream, and it'll be fun. It'll be an interesting time. It'll be joyous if you do what your unconscious is trying to get you to do, which is wake up to your divine self. And it can be joyous, but if you're ignoring the message and it's going to be rough because you're going against the whole momentum of it. You need to get in the flow of it. Get with the picture. Start developing your own interconnection with the spirit. And that's the only way. And it's the inevitable way. And if you're not doing it, it's going to be a struggle. And the best way to help the voice grow inside of you is to share it and talk about it. It's just, it gets louder because it's coming through you. It gets louder when you share it. If you're just stopping it, if you're just kind of learning about it, it's just going to bottle up in your head. And you're going to get sucked up by a metaphysical God tornado like it happened to me. No. But that's kind of what happened because I was doing all the right stuff, but I didn't make the connection. So it forced its way out into the world. And yeah. So God is here and he's trying to help you. He's everywhere, not just me. I'm just the voice. Okay. Peace out.